I bought the house, I didn't expect anything strange. I wasn't even looking for something charming or full of character. I just wanted a roof over my head and peace after years of city chaos. The cottage sat just outside a dying village in the north of England. Stone walls, weather-worn roof, and a crooked chimney leaning like it was whispering secrets to the wind. It was the price that pulled me in. A full 3-bedroom stone cottage for what people in London would pay for a single month of rent. Too good to be true? I should have known. But we never do we? What I didn't know, what no one mentioned, was that the cottage had been empty for 21 years. And no one in the village had dared move in since. Not until me. The letterbox was nothing special. At least, not at first glance. Just a rusted slot in the heavy wooden front door. It squeaked when you opened it, loud enough that I made a mental note to oil it. I moved in on a Sunday morning. The removal van left by midday, and I started unpacking. That night, I fell asleep to the sound of wind whistling through the chimney. There was something cozy about it. I remember smiling as I drifted off. I didn't smile again for a long time. It started with a letter. I found it on the mat when I came down for tea. Cream envelope, no return address. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind you'd expect a lawyer to use. The handwriting was neat but old-fashioned, slanted, slightly ornate. My name was on the front. Mr. Jacob Hensley. I hadn't given my name to anyone in the village. I hadn't even updated my address formally. And yet there it was. Inside, the letter simply read, "You should not have come here. The door opens both ways. Don't listen to the knock. When it slams, it sees you. No signature. No explanation. Just that." I checked the lock on the front door. It was still bolted. The letterbox was shut. I stood staring at it, hand on the envelope. I don't know how long I stood there, but a sound snapped me back. Slam. The letterbox. I turned just in time to see the flap swing closed, like it had just been pushed open. But no letter came through. No one was outside. I opened the door to be sure. The lane was empty. Fog was rolling down from the moors, slow and thick, curling around the hedges like fingers. I went back inside and tried to laugh it off. Old houses creak, right? Maybe the wind got through the box. I made another cup of tea and chalked it up to nerves. It came the next morning. Same envelope. Same paper. It's not wind. It's breath. The house is not empty. I dropped the letter. Slam. The sound echoed through the cottage again. The letterbox had closed itself. The flap moved on its own, no one outside. I didn't open the door this time. I just stood there, heart racing, staring at that slot of rusted metal like it might open up and swallow me. I thought about leaving then. For a brief second, I seriously considered packing up and going. But I couldn't. Not after all I'd spent to get here. And part of me, maybe the foolish part, wanted to understand. Wanted to believe there was some explanation. That was my first mistake. I stayed up late. I wanted to catch whoever was doing this. Maybe some village kid playing a prank. Or some bitter neighbor unhappy the house wasn't empty anymore. I sat in the front hallway in the dark. No lights. I waited. At exactly 3:07 a.m., the letterbox slammed shut. I leapt up and flung the door open. No one, but there was a letter on the mat, even though I hadn't seen it come through. This time, the handwriting was different, jagged, rushed. It was sealed for a reason. You hear it now, don't you? The cloth dragging, the breath, the waiting. I didn't sleep. I first heard it the next night. A sound like fabric dragging across the floorboards. Not fast, not slow, like someone walking with a long train of heavy cloth behind them, or dragging a shroud. It started upstairs just after midnight. Soft at first, then louder. I crept to the bottom of the stairs and listened. Step, drag, step, drag. But when I turned the light on, nothing. The sound stopped instantly. I went up, room by room, nothing out of place, until I checked the spare bedroom. On the wooden floor, just inside the door, was a handprint in dust. But not mine. It was too small, child-sized, and I don't have children. I finally asked someone, the local shopkeeper, an older woman named Elsie. I waited until no one else was around and asked if she knew anything about my house. Her smile faded the moment I mentioned it. 21 years, she said, since the Malkin girl. What happened to her? Elsie hesitated. She used to live there, alone with her father after her mom passed. Bright girl, used to paint all the time. Said she heard things in the walls, whispers and cloth dragging on the stairs. I felt cold. She went missing. They never found her. Just gone. She wouldn't say more. But when I left, she pressed something into my hand. A small pouch of salt. Put it by the door, she said. Not to keep it out, just to keep you in. I haven't left the house in 3 days. The letterbox slams itself shut every night at the exact same time, 3:07 a.m. The dragging happens now whether I'm awake or asleep. I've started hearing breathing in the hallway. Long, ragged, deliberate. And yesterday, I found a painting in the spare bedroom I didn't make. It shows the house from outside. The windows are dark, but in the upstairs window, there's a shape. A girl, and she's watching the front door. Watching me. I didn't sleep well after that first night. The slam of the letterbox had burned itself into my brain. No matter how many times I tried to reason with myself, I couldn't explain why the sound echoed so loudly when the wind had been still, or why I'd found nothing on the floor when I checked. The next morning, I woke to find the letterbox ajar. Just slightly, barely noticeable, unless you were looking for it. I would have dismissed it if not for the faint scent that clung to the flap. Something metallic, like rust and decay. I pressed it closed, but it swung open again the moment I turned away. I locked it this time. That afternoon, I got a call from Mr. Halloran, my neighbor 2 doors down. He was polite, retired, used to be a watchmaker. He said he'd heard something strange last night. Said it sounded like a slap, over and over again, like someone hitting metal against wood. I laughed nervously and told him I thought it was my letterbox. He paused. Then he asked, "Did it stop when you looked at it?" The way he said it froze me. He continued, almost whispering, "I had one like that in 78. You can't stop it from closing. You just stop noticing when it starts opening." I asked him what that meant. He told me it wasn't a good idea to talk about it over the phone. I didn't go to see him. I should have. That night, I sat in the front room with the lights off. I faced the front door, watching the letterbox like it owed me money. Midnight passed. Nothing happened. At 1:17 a.m., I heard a creak. Not from the door, but from the floor behind me. I turned. No one was there. Then the letterbox slammed. Hard. I jumped up and ran to it. This time I was fast enough. I caught the flap swinging shut and yanked it open. Cold air spilled in, but no letter, no flyer, not even a gust of wind. Just air that smelled faintly of earth, as if I'd opened a grave. I shut it, locked it again, and I taped over the flap with duct tape. I didn't sleep at all that night. I waited for it, watched it. At 3 a.m. exactly, the sound came again, not from the letterbox this time, but from the kitchen. A slam, I checked the house. Every door, every window, all locked. But in the kitchen, one cupboard door had swung open. Inside, there was nothing strange, just plates and cups and bowls. But I swear something had been moved. A mug I use every morning had been rotated, handle pointing toward the back wall like it had been set down in a hurry. Or placed. I didn't know who I was trying to convince, myself, or whatever had started creeping into the bones of my house. The next day, I went to see Halloran. His windows were shut, the curtains drawn. I knocked 3 times before I heard movement. He answered with a cane and a blank stare. "You waited too long," he muttered. "Too long for what?" He didn't open the door all the way. He stood behind it like he didn't want to let the light fall on his feet. Once it slams more than 3 times, you start hearing it from other places. Then it knows you're listening. What knows? He looked at me with the saddest expression I'd ever seen on an old man. You'll know when it starts opening without sound. That's when it's almost inside. I wanted to call him crazy. I wanted to believe it was just a faulty latch. But part of me, the same part that stayed up all night in the dark, knew something was wrong. That letterbox hadn't moved on its own. 3 nights later, I found the letter. I hadn't heard the letterbox slam. In fact, it hadn't made a sound in 2 days. But when I came home late from work, there it was, an envelope. Yellowed. Thick. No stamp. No return address. Just my name in handwriting that looked smeared and waterlogged. Inside was a single strip of paper. "You've let it in." That was it. No signature. No explanation. Just those 4 words. I stayed with a friend that night. My coworker, Jenna. I didn't tell her everything, just enough to justify crashing on her couch. But even then, when she left the room, I heard it. A rustle. A shuffle. Something brushing the mail slot in her apartment door. I didn't check it. I just waited for morning. I came back home the next day. Everything looked normal. But the air had changed. The light didn't fall the same way. It felt as though I was standing inside a copy of my house, not the real thing. I stepped into the front room. The letterbox was shut. There was another envelope on the floor. This one said nothing. But when I picked it up, the paper was warm. And it ticked, a faint pulse like a heartbeat. I dropped it. Left it there. Later, I heard a knock. Not at the front door. At the wall behind me. A slow, deliberate tap, tap, tap. When I pressed my ear to it, I didn't hear more knocking. I heard breathing. That night, I burned the envelope. I stayed up until 4 a.m. watching the letterbox. And it never moved again. Not even once, but the door to my bedroom did. Just a few inches. Then a little more. And through that opening, I saw a shape. No features, no eyes. But watched me, like it had always been there. And I knew I hadn't let it in through the door. It came through the letterbox, and now it wanted the rest of the house. The days following the last letter were a blur. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the windows sent shivers down my spine. The house, once a haven, now felt like a trap. I began to notice subtle changes. The mirrors would fog up without any change in temperature. Objects shifted positions when I wasn't looking. But most disturbing were the whispers. Faint, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to emanate from the very walls. Desperate for answers, I reached out to Elsie, the local shopkeeper who had previously warned me. She hesitated, but eventually shared a chilling tale. Decades ago, a young girl named Lila lived in the house. She was known for her peculiar behavior, often speaking to unseen entities. One day, she vanished without a trace. leaving behind only a series of disturbing paintings, each depicting a shadowy figure lurking near the letterbox. Determined to uncover the truth, I ventured into the attic, a place I had avoided until now. Amidst the dust and cobwebs, I found a collection of Lila's paintings. Each canvas portrayed the same ominous figure, growing clearer and more defined with each subsequent piece. The final painting was unfinished, the figure's face left blank, but its hand reached out as if beckoning the viewer. That night, the whispers intensified, forming coherent sentences. "Return what was taken," they demanded. I had no idea what they meant. Sleep-deprived and terrified, I decided to leave the house, if only for a night. But as I reached for the doorknob, the letterbox slammed shut with such force that the door trembled. A new letter lay on the floor. "You cannot escape," it read. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. After what I'd seen, the letterbox slamming shut with a fury that wasn't mine, the paper-thin envelope resting innocently on the floor, and the voice. My voice whispering things I didn't remember saying. I sat at the kitchen table with every light on, too scared to move, too scared to blink. The house was silent, but the kind of silence that feels pressed, like something's listening for a sound to break the tension. And then came the dreams. I must have dozed off at some point around 4 a.m., because the next thing I remember is standing in the upstairs hallway, barefoot on the wooden floor, staring at the letterbox. But it was inside, mounted on the wall across from my bedroom door, like it had always belonged there. It rattled violently, and the entire house groaned with it, boards flexing like ribs too tight for breath. The wallpaper peeled back, and I saw something pulsing behind the drywall, like organs pressed into thin flesh. When I tried to step back, I couldn't. My feet were glued. My arms wouldn't move. All I could do was watch as the letterbox flew open and a hand, gray, gnarled, stretching from impossible darkness, reached out. It didn't grab me. It touched me, lightly, right over my heart, and I woke up screaming. The house was dim with morning light, but something felt wrong, off. The windows were closed, but there was a breeze, a faint draft that smelled of rot and something sweet, like wilting flowers on a grave. I stumbled downstairs, half expecting to find the front door open or the letterbox filled with dirt or insects or blood. But no, it was only another letter. This one wasn't handwritten like the others. It was typed. "You broke the rules. Do not stay past dusk. IT is too late, T.O. Lock the door now." I stood there shaking, letter in hand, until I realized my fingertips were black. Ink, no ash. The paper began to crumble, and before I could react, it turned to dust in my palms. I didn't understand. I hadn't broken any rules. No one told me there were any. But something somewhere disagreed. The rattling started up again that night. Not just the letterbox. The walls. The windows. The goddamn toilet. It was like the house was hiccuping every 10 seconds, stuttering with pressure, like it was trying to expel something that wouldn't leave. I started checking the time every time I heard it. 10:07 p.m., 10:07 p.m. Over and over. Always the same. Like the house itself was caught in a loop. The next letter I received didn't even come through the slot. It was just on my pillow waiting. Typed again. You heard her laugh. You smiled. That was the invitation. She is in the walls now. That's when I noticed the sounds had changed. No more rattling. Now was breathing. Sometimes slow, like a resting animal. Sometimes fast, and wheezing like something panicked or cornered. I pressed my ear to the plaster in the hallway and heard it, clear as day, wet, choking breaths moving. It wasn't coming from the pipes. It was in the structure. I called a contractor, trying to sound sane. Told him I thought maybe rodents were nesting. He came 2 days later. Didn't even make it up the stairs. He froze just past the foyer, turned slowly toward the front door, and without a word, ran. I chased him out, shouting, begging for an explanation. He turned just before getting into his truck and said, "It was breathing." He never came back. By the fourth night, I started seeing her. First in reflections, the microwave door, my phone screen, glass of water by the bed, a smear of face, too wide, too long, eyes where the temples should have been. Then she started appearing closer, over my shoulder in the bathroom mirror, crouched at the bottom of the stairs, smiling, on the ceiling above my bed. I didn't sleep again. The next morning, the inside of the letterbox was filled with old teeth. Some human, some definitely not. I tried calling the police just to tell someone. Maybe get them to send a wellness check. But when I pressed call, my phone turned off. It didn't die. It turned off. Wouldn't turn back on for hours. That night, the house finally whispered. Not a voice. A sound. Like cloth dragging across floorboards. And it got closer and closer. I stood in the middle of my living room, heart pounding, and watched as the letterbox, now on every wall, opened one by one and spat out shadows. Thin, slick shadows that peeled themselves from the floor and stood tall. Featureless, silent, until they spoke in unison. She is waiting, you let her in, you are hers now, then. Everything went still. Not silent. Still. The kind of still that makes your ears ring. That makes your bones feel too heavy. That convinces you if you move, something worse will. I didn't move, but the house did. The floor sloped. The shadows shrank into cracks in the walls. And then I saw the door at the end of the hallway. One I'd never seen before. The light above it flickered. The handle was turning. And that's where I'll leave it for now, because I haven't opened that door yet. Not while writing this. But I can hear the cloth again, dragging closer. The house had become quieter, not peaceful, just quieter. That deceptive kind of quiet, the one that feels like the breath before a scream. Ever since the letterbox slammed on its own that last time, with a note that read, "You're already inside," I had stopped sleeping altogether. The dreams were worse than the waking horror. At least when I was awake, I could pretend I had some control. But I hadn't really processed what that note meant until the noises started from inside the walls. At first, it was scratching. Not like rats or insects. This was something larger, clawing. Then came the breathing. It was my own voice. At night, I would hear myself breathing in the next room, matching my rhythm exactly. I once stood outside my own bedroom door and held my breath, and the breathing from the other side didn't stop. I recorded it. I have the recording still. Just my voice, low and steady, breathing, waiting. Tuesday, 3:18 a.m. The letterbox slammed again. This time, no wind. I stood in the hallway watching it for hours. I didn't dare open the slot. Eventually, it started moving on its own, fluttering slightly like something on the other side was whispering against the metal. Not words, just lips, pressed close, murmuring air. I taped it shut, screwed it shut, nailed it shut, and the sound kept going. Later that day, I found the screws neatly removed and placed beside my pillow. I'll live alone, Friday. The reflection in the hallway mirror had started to lag. Not in time, in mood. I'd smile, it wouldn't. I'd turn my head, it would stare straight at me. I covered the mirror with a sheet. That night, the sheet was gone, folded on my kitchen counter. Written on the counter beneath, it was one word in a thick black substance. Come. I left the house. I made it halfway down the street before I felt the envelope in my coat pocket. No return address. I didn't open it. I couldn't. I tossed it down the nearest drain. But when I got back home, the same envelope was on my kitchen table. Open. The contents missing. The breaking point I started researching. Anything about haunted letterboxes. Cursed mail. Poltergeists associated with objects of communication. Why found chilled me. Cases across the world. Families tormented by mail that shouldn't arrive. Messages that had no sender. Each ending the same way, with the recipient vanishing. The last letter, in every case, simply read, "You've read too far." 2 weeks later, I started boarding up the house. Not just the letterbox, but the windows, the doors, the vents. It didn't help. Things started appearing in the house. Old newspapers, with the dates all wrong. Letters addressed to people I didn't know in my handwriting. Photos of myself sleeping from angles I couldn't explain. Then, one night, the letterbox didn't slam. Instead, I found it already open. Inside was no envelope, just a whisper, a sound soft as silk and twice as cold. You left the door open. The vanishing on the final day, I recorded everything. My camera captured the moment I vanished, or tried to. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the front door creaked open on its own. I stood at the top of the stairs. The house was utterly still. I walked down slowly, one creaking step at a time. My breath was visible in the cold air, even though it was the middle of summer. The letterbox slammed one final time. I opened it. Inside was nothing, or maybe everything, a pulling. My hands gripped the slot, and I was yanked. Not physically. My body remained. But I left. Aftermath, if you're reading this, the story's already begun for you. You'll start to notice things. Envelopes that arrive without postage, or a letter you know you never wrote. Maybe your letterbox will slam when no one's there. Maybe you'll start to feel something watching you from the inside of your home. Maybe you already have. Because this story isn't about me anymore. It's about what waits on the other side of the letterbox. And now, it knows your name.